Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our open door show. Pleased to have you here on this lovely, warm, sunny Tuesday evening. My name is Richie Clapson, for those that don't know, and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child, who I'm certain is going to give you a wave right now. There you go. Look at
as always, and a good evening to you all.
Look at that, very polite, isn't he? Anyway, look, guys, just in case this is your first time with us, let me tell you what you've let yourself in for, in this show. Our aim is to give you a whole load of information, a whole load of knowledge, basically 45 minutes of non-stop positivity in these difficult times. And it's all set around the theme of business and property development. Isn't that right, Ian?
Certainly is. So Richie and I run a company called propertyCEO, and our day job is training people how to become successful small-scale property developers. So many people kind of quite like the idea of developing property, but they often worry it might be a bit risky, very complex. So our job is to give them the support and the training that they need to be able to do it as safely and as successfully as possible. We also think that right now there's quite an amazing opportunity that's kind of in sight, just around the corner, which is going to create a lot of opportunity and therefore wealth for developers. So we wanted to help people find out about it, and of course to see if property development might be a good fit.
Good stuff. And you know, at the end of the day, if there wasn't enough going on in this world with a global pandemic, COVID-19, although having said that, watching the news the weekend, I think there were some images of Southend-on-Sea, and I don't think they've been told about the global pandemic, because they seem to be out in force on their beach, and I'm sure many other beaches around the country. And we're possibly, going to be heading into a recession. But at the moment, there's a lot of opportunities around. So for those that seek those things out, rather than waiting for everything to settle down, the opportunities are there. So we're going to be giving you lots of advice, as we said, maybe some predictions, but there are just our own individual predictions, or our guests, as indeed we have guests. Normally on a Saturday, we try and get a guest in every now and then. A bit of training, obviously, because then we're going to give you hopefully some form of useful information, but above all, we're going to have fun doing it. So hopefully that's good. We're happy to take questions as we go through, but first of all, can you just give us a quick wave, make sure you can hear and see both of us, please? Yes, all the hands going up. Terrific. Thank you very much. Stop. Good, excellent. Hello, just welcome this evening. VJ Raj is on, Debs is on, Ava's on, Julian's on, Roma's on, Clive's on, Kathy's on, Maria's on. I've got a few hellos in the box. Jane's on, Karen, 2-3 Karens are on, Robert's on, Stephen's on. Andrew says, evening, gents. Ashley says, good evening, Richie and Ian. Thank you very much. Ava says, hi, guys, exclamation mark. A good evening, chaps, says Gavin. Well, good evening to you all, and welcome to our wonderful little show here. Right. It's about questions, so please fire questions into the chat box. We'll then do our best to answer those as we go through. No questions means no show, so you've got to put questions in there for us. Anything you want about property or business development, we're happy to try and answer. And of course, you can send questions in throughout the week. So we have a few that's come in this week. We've actually quite a few come in, so we've got a few we can pick up as well. I'm going to kick off with one of those, but please put other questions in, and we'll go through those. We can't always guarantee, I'm sorry, to answer every single question. And occasionally, if we've missed it from another show, we'll try and roll it on. If we can, we'll pick it up in the following show. So okay, right. Okay, we have a question in. Okay. Websites. Do we know anyone that knows anything about websites? I reckon Mr. Child might know a thing or two about these. So the question is, what's the biggest mistakes that we see in websites and people putting websites together? I'm assuming this is for a developer. What about framing this in? What about giving us the 5 biggest mistakes? Because to be honest, guys, if we let him run on this, he'll be on here till Saturday. We've got another show to do then. So Ian, what about limiting it to the 5 biggest mistakes that you see in websites?
I think I'm quite lucky to get 5 there. I thought you were going to say 3. So I'll take it, let my luck where I find it. So websites, where should we start? So the first thing I think that people websites is actually what they're for when they set up a property development company or business website. And it's all actually about reinforcing credibility. I think a lot of people, we're all used to visiting websites and looking at other people's websites. And when we design our own, we almost kind of feel like we've got to sell ourselves. It's almost about selling rather than about credibility. But actually, your website is one of the biggest sort of aspects of your credibility as a developer, particularly if you're a new developer. And I think that really links to a second point, which is where your visitors come from. And again, a lot of people seem to think when they design their website that the visitors will be coming from places like Google. So if you're creating, I don't know, a property development business based in Winchester, then you design your website and people tend to think that, well, perhaps these customers, whoever they are, they're going to be searching for property developers in Winchester, and they're going to come across my site, and I've got to be able to tell them how wonderful I am and kind of lead them from there. And that's not at all what happens. It's certainly, we don't want that to happen, and it isn't what happens, because of course, in order to get that sort of traffic, you've got to be pretty adept at your kind of search engine optimization and get to pretty highly ranked on Google to be able for your site to come up. And we don't actually want traffic to be coming that way at all. What's actually happening is the people that look at your website are the people you've already met. They're the people that you've networked with, that you've had conversations with, that you might have had a conversation with about maybe them coming onto your professional team. Maybe it's a private investor. Maybe it's a commercial bank that's just received your application via the broker for finance on your latest project. And so what's happening here is that all of those people that that are landing on your site, 95% of them, I suggest, have already either met you or certainly had some sort of contact with you or your business through another means, a much more direct means. So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see, people kind of designing their website as if they're going to be, it's a funnel from the internet, whereas actually it works entirely the other way. The third thing I would say is probably then about the audience that the developer has. So again, it's actually only a very small audience. There's probably around about 10 people that you need to impress with your website. For sure there'll be the occasional networker and contact somebody that you've bumped into that perhaps is just intrigued having met you. But there's also going to be people like your professionals. So if you have a conversation, let's just say you're looking for an architect to come onto your team or for a specific project, then guess what? When the architect has met you or had a virtual meeting with you, when they then go back to their office, go back on their computer, they're just simply going to go on your website. And what they want to be able to see is that what they learn from your website kind of matches what you've told them and sort of builds on it, consolidates it. So we're kind of adding value to the picture that you've already painted. And we've got loads of people who've got estate agents. So of course, when you're looking to buy a property, then the estate agent, one of their jobs is not just to find a buyer, but it's to find a buyer that's going to complete on it. So they may not have heard of you before. How will they kick the tires to be able to assure their seller that you're a good buyer? Well, one of the ways they'll start is by looking on your website. So again, it's making sure then that if you put yourself in the mind of an architect that might be on your team, an estate agent who you might be buying a property from, an investor who you might be lending money to, all of these people are going to be looking at your website, and you need to walk a mile in their shoes. Imagine that you're in their shoes. What do they see, and what sort of story does it tell them? I think finally, four. I'm up to four. So 4 would be about detail. He said, having gone into quite a lot of detail, but actually lots of people have too much detail. They kind of focus on like telling it all, and actually you don't want to tell it all. You want to keep a big part of the story back. It really is just about looking professional, ticking the high-level boxes, and not sweat the detail. There's no point in doing that. That's for a face-to-face conversation. And don't put stuff up there that makes it look like it's really attractive to investors. again, those are private conversations. You don't want to be selling that off the website. You want to be selling that face to face. It's far more, is a far better way of doing it. And I think the final thing, which is actually one of the biggest issues that I see, and I think I wrote about this or spoke about this in the Facebook group, is about people's bios. They're the page that is about them, and they're quite often they damn themselves through faint praise. They're just not. They don't big themselves up enough, and it's not about exaggerating anything, because we don't want to do that. It's actually about being able to present ourselves in such a way that when the people that are reading it, that audience that I talked about, they just go, wow, they think, fantastic, really good. And I haven't misrepresented anything. I haven't told any pork pies. There is even if you've not done any development before, it's perfectly possible to be able to paint a very attractive picture of you as an entrepreneur, bringing a team together to do developments. And so I think that's probably the fifth and final area where I think people can get it wrong on websites. We review people's websites as part of the training that we do, and so we see quite a few, and they're pretty common mistakes. But luckily, with a bit of pointing in the right direction, they are quite easy to fix, and you can actually get a fantastic result if you do it well. Your website will really be like another member of your team, because it really supports you.
There you go, Karen. That's Karen S. Told you, Karen, good job we limited to 5, because that's a third of the show gone just there on websites. Once you get Mr. Child going on things like that, he's away. Okay.
See if we get Mr. Clapson going on the subject of biscuits, because I did actually happen today to come in before. We obviously social distancing, and I went into the studio. Well, where I couldn't help but notice that there was a few sort of kind of elements lying around that I can't see in shot at the moment, but that you've obviously been I don't know, you've been indulging whilst I don't know what you've doing in the show.
In the studio. Yeah.
So down to your left, quite a big box, empty box.
What about it?
Quite embarrassing, honestly.
Well, this box of biscuits.
Well, it's not a box of biscuits, is it? It's a box of empty biscuits. It's an empty box of biscuits.
Well, it is empty now, yeah. I just use it for storage.
Okay.
I put paperwork in it.
Excellent. And the other one?
Huh?
The other one?
There's only one box.
No. Down the other side.
We need to go on with the showy. Other side. What? You mean the guest biscuits?
It's embarrassing. Anyway, let's crack on.
Guest biscuits.
Unbelievable.
But when I got the pack, they were empty. Look, guys, let's crack on with the show. He's taking the mick out of me, and I'm a sensitive soul. I don't like it. Just welcome a few others that's joined us since we've been chatting. So Jess is on, Beth's on, Sheikh Mohammed's on, Ricky, Carl, Deborah's on. A few of you have joined, guys. Yeah, look, please join my club, not Ian's club. He's taking the mick out of me about biscuits. Right, Vijay, welcome here. You've got a question in. He says, hi, a long question here. Well, that's not unusual, Vijay, because Ian will give you a long answer. Let's have a look. What is the best stroke easiest type of light industrial unit to convert into residential units under PD? Would it be a warehouse that has plant machinery and therefore a solid floor, but possibly contamination? Or would it be, say, a larger dental practice, which may need reinforcing the foundations, but is unlikely to have contaminants? I'm guessing this could be a long answer. Please advise. Okay, guys, are you all sat down comfortably? This could take us an hour or two. Look, I think, Vijay, excellent question. So if we try to summarize that, what is the best or the simplest type of light industrial conversion? Well, when you talk about dental practice there, dental practice generally is going to be in an office type establishment, okay? You could have a dental manufacturing plant that does, implants and false teeth and so on. A lot of those places might exist in small industrial units. I think if we're thinking of a light industrial unit It's not necessarily what they're being used for now, it's what they were designed for. So it could be, Vijay, that you've got a light industrial unit that's actually currently being used as a dental practice. But what was it used for before? You'd need to go back and investigate that. And you can often do that. You can go back through the ratings website. You can go to the planning office. If you go in and look at the planning history, you might see that it's gone through several changes of use in its lifespan. So you could look back and say, actually, yeah, once it used to be a manufacturing plant or a printing works or whatever it used to be. And then you could actually perhaps tell that actually it did have reasonably heavy kit on the floor at that time. Now, for those that aren't aware, if you want to try and convert light industrial buildings, and I'm not going to try and give you a lesson this evening on this show, one thing I would say, and this is not a plug for the book, although it is a plug for the book, but it's a plug to give you information, is if you want to grab a copy of that, we don't make any money out of that, but that's on Amazon, and it's all about industrial to residential conversions. And what this book talks about, it talks about building straight off of the concrete slab where it used to have heavy plant. And because of the weight of that plant, you can more or less take that off and build a residential building inside. This book will tell you in a lot more detail about it. So I'm assuming Vijay has read this one, and that's why he's coming up with this question. But for some of you, I just wanted to clarify, what's this on Amazon these days, Ian? It's about £6 or something, is it?
£6 something or other, yeah. Yeah, which is what they charge us to print it and deliver it.
But worth a read in terms of if you're thinking about converting industrial buildings. I think the issue really then is that you might be looking at the moment, BJ, a building that's a dental practice, but previously it had other uses. So this question of, well, maybe I don't want to go for the one that's got the heavy plant because contamination. The dental practice could have had heavy contamination in it previously. So you've got to look back at that history. Equally, you've got to have a look at the plant and the usage in there. There's a whole load of things that you need to be thinking about. But this is where, when you operate in a development area and you operate as a CEO, okay, and for a lot of you out there that's got used to us or used to the show, that's why we call it the Property CEO. That's why the name of the company. It's about operating as a CEO and having the right support mechanism of people around you. So in this instance, Vijay, what you'd be doing here is looking towards your structural engineer, perhaps with your architect, maybe a site investigation crew, to actually start looking at this building in a little bit more detail. Even just looking back at the history as a structural engineer, for those that don't know, I'm a chartered structural engineer by profession, not that I practice anymore. But historically, what we would have done is, if Vijay, if you'd have come to us and said, I'm looking at this building, we'd have looked at the historic use and said, Vijay, yeah, I think you've got a reasonable percentage chance, we might even qualify that in a 70-30 or whatever, of building straight off of this with no foundations. But again, if you've read the book, you'll understand that actually you have to do investigation. So you do have to put some core holes through the slab, understand the slab thickness, and see whether you can build off of it. But it's all to do with how much loading's been on that slab compared to putting a residential building, which is relatively lightweight, on top of it. And also these buildings are quite high. So for those that are really just trying to picture this evening, think of your local B&Q. If you'll have to go in that now after lockdown, or one at a time, or whatever it is, look at the height of this building. Look at those huge racks with all the kit on. Now, a lot of it might be lighting and light bulbs, no problem, but go down the other end of the building where they've got the sand and cement on racks or sheets of MDF and plyboard. A lot of weight there. And actually, it's normally racked up right to the ceiling. With the forklifts, they bring this stuff down. That puts huge load on these concrete slabs. And you can probably just imagine taking all that racking away, taking all that concrete and sandbags and plywood and putting a house in there, which has got a few walls, a bit of a ceiling, a washing machine, a few kitchen units, a few books, if you're a bit of a bookworm, but that's about it. Not a lot of stuff goes in there. So we play this balancing act as developers of offsetting one load against the other. So I think really, Vijay, the answer here is you've got to look back at the history to find out really what it's about. Of course, the great thing is, as you say, it can be done under PD. Vijay, hopefully that's answered that with some detail, although without of detail. Good stuff. Okay. Let's have a look. Chris Phillips said, great insights into websites. Thanks, Ian. Good information. Yeah, he dragged on a bit though, didn't he, Chris, to be fair? But, it's okay. We get used to it. No
Well,
one's
I didn't plug a book, which not everybody can manage to get through a show without.
Making money out of it. If we could make a fortune out of it, I'd be plugging it every 5 minutes. I'd be subtly putting it across that like that, but we don't. But VJ says, awesome, thanks, VJ. Glad to be of assistance. Okay, next question. Let's have a look what we've got here. Okay, Julian says, Julian says, please could you kindly say a little more about the range and kind of opportunities we are likely to see in the next few months, in particular the opportunities which will best suit a first-time developer. Shall I pick that one up?
Well, please do, yeah.
Okay, Julian, there is going to be some fantastic opportunities out there. Okay, there is some really interesting stuff. And yes, there are some really peach opportunities for first-time developers. Julian, I don't know where you're at in your journey, whether you're just starting getting educated or whether you are educated and you're about to kick off. I don't know. But let me put this together on the basis of both of those. So for the benefit of others that's listening tonight who may be ready to go, or they're really just thinking about it right now about getting into development, maybe they're a landlord thinking about getting development, maybe a professional, an architect. We've got a number of architects, project managers, cost consultants that we've trained, a number of industry professionals, as well as lots of landlords and independent, completely diverse business people, restaurateurs, all sorts of things. So just trying to answer that, Julian, the opportunities out there at the moment are still coming to the fore. There's going to be lots out there that's going to turn up. And if we just try and pick these off, a couple of them, and then I'm going to point you to a webinar that exists on our website, because we get asked this question quite a lot. So I'm going to give you a few minutes answer now, Julian, but grab a pen and paper and I'll point you in the direction of something that you can sit down for an hour and get a lot more detail, a lot more depth about. So first of all, the office market. Now, for those that are aware and for those that aren't, we've had opportunities in the office market as developers to convert office space into residential, okay, under permitted developments. Now, one thing that we say a lot, and Julian, again, I don't know your position here, where you're at, but we'd always say to first-time developers, go down the route of either planning or permitted development, planning in place or permitted development. Don't go down the route of trying to get planning on something, because it's like going into a boxing ring with one arm tied behind your back, and that probably doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I've never done that, and I don't intend to, that's for sure. So going down the route and trying to get planning permission on something is often going to be hard work, because you are now in the hands of others who are going to have control over, and you don't really need. Now, take one of the permitted development opportunities. So in offices, we've got those. The criticism has been for a lot of developers, new, youngish developers coming into the marketplace, is that the sort of real glut of offices that we had, this oversupply of offices back 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, has all gone. I actually used to dispute that, because I say they're always there. You just needed to be in a position to get them when they came up, because did you know 50% of the real opportunities do never come to the market? They don't come on the marketplace. It's who you know, and it's about how you get to contact and know people. That's really important, that as an aside. But what this current situation will do with the downturn, companies going bust, landlords rethinking what they do, companies rethinking what they do. Do we work with everyone at home off their kitchen tables? Do we want smaller offices? What do we want? There almost certainly is going to be, Julian, more offices coming to the market. I bet you 55 pence that's going to happen. Okay, it's definitely going to be more opportunity. I might even go 65p, because I'm feeling quite positive. So, Julian, definite opportunities come to the market in offices. We talked about industrial buildings just now with VJ. There is definitely, for exactly the same reasons, going to be more industrial buildings that are going to come onto the market. Now, yes, so someone might be shouting at the show tonight, well, what about PD rights for industrial buildings? They're going to run out at the end of September. Maybe no one is shouting, but then I've just done it for you, so that's entirely okay. So there could be an extension. No one knows, but if the regular listeners to the show here, our regular crew, our fans that are on here all the time, will know that I've talked about the likelihood, and perhaps even listened to the Colin Smith interview, a planning consultant that we had in one day, going back several weeks now, one of the shows. And he, basically agreed with me that he felt that actually the planning system was going to extend PD rights for light industrial. Just, it made total sense. And so I think for all the reasons for offices, there's going to be more of those opportunities, perhaps as well, coming to the market. There is also going to be inevitably opportunities in retail. We already have PD rights in retail to extend over the top of shops and put residential units in it, or do stuff below in certain circumstances. There are various PD rights there, certain areas, and rules and restrictions and so on. But we already have rights as new, first-time developers to go into those areas. Well, what's happening to retail? Is the high street dead? Well, I'd say yes. I'd say the high street is dead as we knew it. Okay, the high street will change. It will reinvigorate. It will do something. And I talk a lot about that on this a webinar thing. That's a pre-recorded webinar which we're asked to put together, which I'm going to send you to, Julian. And we talk a lot there about why there's going to be opportunities and where we see them. And there's a term that I've been using quite a bit and backed up now by some pretty serious players out there in the retail industry. And I've used it called co-retail. No one's using that term, but it's an area where I think there's going to be some cracking opportunities for new first-time developers in getting involved in co-retail, developing joint retail spaces for a number of users and starting to reinvigorate the high street. Add into that offices, residential, retail, put that mix in. There are some really clever things. As you guys know, and for those that don't, obviously we train people, we train students. We are often talking in depth to our students on some of the training we do about how you can piece together all these opportunities and how, as an entrepreneur, you've got to lead the way. And as an entrepreneur, as a new developer, it doesn't mean to say you can't break new ground. There are PD rules in abundance out there that if you know what to do, you can position yourself right. Website, Ian talked about credibility earlier. You get all those things right, you can open the doors to some terrific opportunities if you know how. So, Julian, there are some really interesting things across all of those sectors. If you go onto our website, Julian, just write this down. And for anyone else, you're welcome to go on there. propertyceo.co.uk website, where you would have registered for the show under the webinars tab. But on the home page, so it's on the home page, scroll down and there's a big red button, and the webinar is called Why Now? Okay, and that's to do with opportunities right now in development. Why now? Why you'd want to get into development. And we were asked to put that together by a number of people here on the show in a little bit more detail of where the opportunities were, problems with planning, and also the second half of that webinar is actually about how you can get into development. So equally, if people are out there thinking, is it for me? And I'm almost certain there's somebody on here who's new tonight. Give us a hands up and a wave if you're brand new to our show. Give us a hands up and wave. Yes, a few of you. Oh, well, Julian is himself. Excellent, Julian. That's great. It was great to have you here. And a few others, Julian. You're not alone in being new. So, if you're thinking about getting into development, if you're brand new to our show and development's brand new, definitely go and check that out, because that gives you a bit of a steer. I mean, development is not for everyone. I think that's important we say that. It's not easy, but if you get it right, it can work. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, Julian, hopefully that's answered your question there. Let's go to another question.
Actually, just to add to Julian's point, I think one of the things that I would just mention in the context of a first-time developer is that your first job is in many respects, you want to make that one as straightforward as possible. Richie mentioned that, do a job that's got permitted development rights already, or it's got planning permission already, because that takes away an element of risk. But actually, you might have a kind of a longer term strategy about what your second, third, fourth jobs are going to be in terms of size, scale, and type. But actually, your first one, I would almost encourage you to think of that as part of your training, because what we're doing with that is we're building the team and getting the finance, getting some credibility, doing lots of things for the first time to give yourself some slack with the first job. You've got a lot of other things going on and you're going to be learning as well. And we want to make that first one, to get it under our belts, get it on the scoreboard, so to speak, as safely and easy and as successfully as possible. And then you can, if you want to do something different, whether it's in terms of scale or the type, that can then come in from your second one, where you've taken a massive leap forward.
Good stuff. Excellent. Julian says thank you very much. Julian, you and others that are here on the show, I'm glad to have you on board. You're probably starting to get a feel for how we operate. We're trying to have a bit of fun. We're also we get these comments that there's no fluff or no BS on this show. We just tell you exactly how it is. For those that don't know, I've been kicking around this industry for about 37 years now, and so you've got a chance here this evening to get straight to the horse's mouth, as it were. That's doing myself a disfavour. Ian, another question for you.
Yeah, so I was going to say no fluff, no BS, and no biscuits. I've just made a note.
No biscuits, yeah. Well, that's a bit harsh, that was. I'll get you back. Okay, Ian, question from Jane. You mentioned, well, just talk about it. So you can have this one, Ian, because I think you need a bit of a chance to get your name out there. You mentioned that small-scale development is where the big opportunity is right now. How small are you talking? What would be a typical project size for one of your students? You want to go for that one?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of small-scale development, we're typically talking a handful of units to maybe around 20 units, particularly if we were talking about maybe flats. If you're talking about detached properties, it would be less. But typically, what you want to avoid is, if we divide the market up, we've got right at the larger scale end, we've got the bigger house builders, the Barratts and the Persimmons. Then we've got a whole raft coming down in scale of intermediate size builders, and guys, there is kind of a threshold below which they're not interested. They need to be able to exercise their economies of scale, so they'll be looking for the big stuff. As we come down, we get into small scale, and I'll park that for a sec, but then if we go below that, we've got people that are perhaps building just one unit, so one house, and again, we don't really want to be in that space for a number of reasons. One, there isn't enough, generally there's not enough margin in it because the deals aren't large enough, but also we tend to end up competing with people that are able to do it cheaper, frankly, because if there's two people that operate in that space as well as small developers, and that is self-builders, so people who are looking to build their own home. And what you tend to encounter there are people that they're not looking to make a profit. You're looking to make a profit and they're not, so guess what, they can afford to pay more. And also they tend to make those decisions more sort of based on their heart, if you like, than their head, whereas you're purely head. So we often can't compete with self-builders when we're doing for one property. Typically, they don't look to build more than one property. And then we've got jobbing builders. These are people that quite often are looking to do smaller jobs. Quite often, it's just actually to keep things ticking over. Perhaps they haven't got any projects on at the moment, and they're looking to keep their workforce occupied. And of course, they are able to do a job at cost. They've got the ability to do things with reduced overheads because obviously they are able to do stuff at cost, and so they can do it cheaper. So both of those guys would be able to potentially do it cheaper than a small developer. But if we stick between, say, maybe 3 and 20 flats, then you're going to be in a spot where typically it will be too big for those people, but it'll be too small for the intermediate and larger scale developers. So that's kind of where we sit in terms of small scale. I think it's also worth pointing out, what does that actually look like? So when we do project developers, invariably we use commercial lending to be able to finance the projects, and our commercial lenders will insist on a minimum profit of 20% GDV, so the gross development value, which is kind of the selling price of the units. So if you're going to build say 5 flats and you're going to sell them for 200,000 each, then that's $1 million overall, which means you're going to make a minimum, you have to make a minimum, target a minimum of 20% profit, which is 200,000. Obviously, if you're doing 20 flats at that level, it would be it'd be £1 million. I would say that students typically, if I had to pick a number, for their first job, it's typically probably between 100 and 300 as a profit per project. And the reason that people often go for smaller deals is because they're less complex, and quite often they can be completed more quickly, as we said earlier, especially if we're doing that with permitted development rights or planning permission, and also in particular if we're converting a property, then we don't have to go into the ground, which is where a lot of the uncertainty can come with a new build. And we're making use of the existing structure that's already there. So we're taking something that already exists and we're converting it rather than building it from scratch. So you can see it's quite an attractive proposition, small scale property development. For one of the biggest reasons is that it's highly leveraged, because of course the people that end up building those projects, the developer coordinates it, but it's actually their team that builds it. The architect, the contractor, planning consultant, the whole team of people that actually go and do the hard yards on site. And yeah, if you're able to get to a stage where you're just focusing on relatively small developments, and maybe sort of doing a couple, having a couple of go at any one time, you can clearly build up quite a successful business, which is highly leveraged and bringing in a very decent income, profits in terms of cash, without having to go to the same level that the bigger guys are going to in terms of building housing estates and larger scale projects. So that's kind of the small scale, and I think that's a sweet spot. And the reason that I think, quite apart from some of the way the numbers work, is actually because that's where a lot of the opportunity is. When Richie was mentioned earlier about the type of opportunity that we're seeing at the moment, and the fact that the government looks like it's got an appetite to put out more permitted development rights rather than to take them away, it's because there's a massive housing shortage, and they see that small scale area as where the big opportunity is, because there's so many buildings like that could be converted into relatively small developments, whereas building a brand new town or a massive housing estate is much more challenging, because invariably you're starting from scratch and potentially on a greenfield site. We've got a lot of brownfield development opportunities out there, and buildings that aren't being used at the moment for their commercial, industrial, retail use. And I think there's a big appetite in government to see if we can get that into the hands of small scale developers, so we can boost the number of residential units that are available on the market.
Jane, if I could just add to that as well, I think the most important thing for us when we train people is to mitigate risks as much as possible. It would be very easy for us to try and sell the dream, go big. I hear some really crass statements that people come back with and say, "Oh, we've been told to go big or don't bother," or that sort of thing, and you think it's rubbish. There are a lot of people who get ambitious very quickly and think that they can just multiply up, and you can look at £1 million profit. What's the point of messing around with 5 projects that's 200,000 when I can do one for £1 million? It's all about risk. It's mitigation of risk. It's very easy to sell a dream, and actually the easiest people to sell a dream is us. It's the people that's trained you. We could sell you all sorts of dreams that you can go and do this, you can go and do that. You can. We have a student who's going to make about £1.8 million over the next couple of years out of development. He is a big risk taker. He's not anywhere near where any of you guys really should be. He really isn't. And for most of us, and self-included, if we can get to a position where you're earning a couple of £100,000 a year, that's a phenomenal amount of money for most of us. And if you could do that relatively risk-free, particularly in this current climate, with all the thoughts that puts in your head, how much more appealing is that? So it's all about mitigation of risk. So we really try and focus people at that end. Jane, hopefully that's answered your question. Okay, Yoko's got a question in. Yoko, welcome here again. Yoko's one of our regulars. Yoko's always asking questions. Yoko, you're a bit of a super fan. We love Yoko. Yoko says, is planning required for a light industrial building to basically take off the roof, put prefab units in, maybe by crane? Well, if not, you're going to have strong arms, Yoko, so I think a crane's a good idea. Put back the original roof, and then the outer building hasn't been changed. She's just exploring the opportunity to convert and using off-site manufacturer. So what Yoko's asking here, really nice question actually, and really thinking out the box. This is good. Yoko's saying, what if she can take an industrial building, I'm assuming this is the roof. This is not me just praying. This is the roof, okay? And she wants to take away the roof within some prefabricated off-site manufactured units, pop back the roof. Does she need planning? No. Now, as always, we are not planning consultants, so check with your planning consultant that you're not doing anything that's slightly odd. If for some strange reason you had a listed building, then they might be a little bit questionable about you taking it off and putting it back in. But largely, if you take a building's envelope away and replace it exactly as was, then there should be no planning implications. Now, the challenge though is, Yoko, you probably are going to want to change it because most industrial buildings will come with a crinkly tin roof of some description. If you're going res, and I don't know whether you're going res here, you don't say, it could be that you're going to turn it into an office space or something. You don't want to put that same material back. So if the whole roof's coming off, you probably want to replace it. So you're probably going for a change of use of a change of materials in the planning as opposed to a change of profile, which is going to be a lot more easily received. So hopefully, Yoko, that answers that quick, simple question. Okay, we've got a question here from Karen. Karen, Yoko says, yes, thank you, great advice, no problem at all. Karen says, Karen M, she says, if most developments don't come to the market, then who has the tips for where to find the development opportunity that isn't going to come to the market? We do, Karen. Okay, next question. Right, Karen, look, we'll give you a few tips. We always try and finish about 1:45, so Karen says, ha ha. I'm not sure if that's a sarcastic ha ha or if she's with me. Anyway, we'll assume it's a bit of fun. We try and wrap up just after 1:45, so Karen, I'm going to give you just a very quick overview here in terms of getting tips. It's about relationships. Who has them? Well, the majority of the people, that's not the only people, but largely you're going to be talking about commercial agents have them. How do you get to those commercial agents? It's about building rapport, okay? It's about building relationships with them. No one's going to give you a deal, Karen, if they don't like you, okay? And if they don't have that relationship, now you've got to go and build. I'm not talking about, you know, chummy going out, having a glass of wine together. It's actually building a business relationship, having rapport with them. But it all circles back around. Remember, Ian was talking to start with at the beginning of the show about websites and why people do things wrong. I just try to remember who asked that question when that came in. That was Karen. And that was probably around the basis of you've got to have credibility and branding. Because if you try and build a relationship with an agent and you've got no credibility, and that's because you've got no branding, then they're not even going to talk to you. So you can't even build that rapport. There's also a process known as stalking. Now, we don't mean in the bad sense. You're not going to get up for this. But if you're going to try and build rapport with someone, you need to find out about them. So you have to stalk them a bit. You need to understand what they're about, what makes them tick, what makes them, you know, what's their interest. Are they interested in this or that in life? Where do they go? Who do they know? Social networks, not social distancing. That's something completely different. That's 2 meters. This is all about your networks. It's like on a roll tonight, isn't it? I'm trying to get these in. I'm looking at the clock. We always try and get you guys away.
You've got 30 seconds.
Karen says, I'm Yoko's friend. Does that help? Karen, I wouldn't have said that you're Yoko's friend. That completely doesn't help at all. We're going to now dismiss you from the show instantly. Of course it helps. Any friends of Yoko's are friends of ours. So Karen, very quickly, because I know there's one other question that Yoko put in, and I want to pick that one up if I can. A very quick answer. Yeah, just think of rapport. There's definitely more stuff. It's what we teach people. When I said, yeah, okay, yes, we have them. It's what we teach people. So yeah, in the way we do. She says, thanks, Richie. That's really helpful.
We'll circle back on some of that because I think there's a bigger subject there, isn't there? It's and we can do that in a future open door session. Give it a bit more time.
Excellent. Ian's going to make a note of that. We'll do that in the future. Good stuff. So Yoko had another question. Let's just see if we can answer this one. If it's not going to be a quick one, then I won't bother, and then I'll just dismiss Yoko. She says, going forward of office space demand, where we'll be having distancing amongst workers, so more cost to the business employees for having at least 2 office room spaces, they might demand cheaper rent. Would you think commercial investment office spaces might get more difficult and become not attractive? Sorry for the long question. I wish I hadn't picked this one up, but just before about to wrap up the show. I tell you what, Yoko, let's pick this one up, another session as well. We can't do it on Saturdays probably because we've got a guest. But we're going to hold this one over and we'll pick this one up in more detail. But basically, I think the demand for offices is going to be significant but different. Okay. And I think the thing that we are all getting het up upon is COVID-19 and it never going away, or there never being a cure, or there never be a treatment. And I strongly believe there will be, because the whole world, all the top scientists in the world with billions and billions of pounds worth of funding are trying to find a solution. So my guess, if I was a betting man, and I might bet 75p on this one, is that they'll find a cure or a treatment at some point. Okay, so I think this hiccup in the office market will be relatively short term. And if we're talking about being developers, and let's say you're not trained and you're about to get trained, and you're probably going to have 6 months of training, you're probably still talking at least 2 years before you put something in the marketplace. If you are trained and you're about to, some of our students that are trained are like right now looking for opportunities, although you're not going to purchase anything at the moment, you're not going to put offers in. You promised me that, you guys. Okay, then on that basis, you're still 18 months away. So the world's going to be a very different place in 18 to 24 months. Your challenge is to try and predict where that's going to be. But office market, that area, let's talk about that a bit more. But hopefully that's just giving you a little bit of a response, because I appreciate you putting the question in. And I know we've not picked up every question tonight, guys, but we always try and get you away. We're going to tell you in a minute who's coming in on Saturday. We've got a great guest on Saturday. But I say apologies. I know there's a few other questions there we haven't got in, but hopefully you've enjoyed that this evening. Now, a couple of final announcements. We always like to say, if you enjoy this, so those of you who are new this evening, people like Julian out there that are new, if you've got a friend who you think will enjoy this, please invite your friend along. Karen's a friend of Yoko's. We don't hold it against anyone. So more of Yoko's friends are welcome, and Karen, more of your friends. So please, we want to spread the word out there to the world, that you can come here, you can get straight answers from the two top guys here. We just tell you how it is, no BS, no fluff. So please bring a friend. We want to try and grow this community if we can. Happy for you to share, promote out there on social media. That'd be great. If you're into social media and you want, give us a wave if you're not. Give us a wave if you're not part of our Facebook group, private closed Facebook group. Yes, there's a few that are not. Okay, including Karen, friend of Yoko's. Okay, Philip's typed in wave. Philip, you need to learn how to wave, because you're never not going to get in our closed group by not knowing how to wave on a webinar. So Philip, that's your task for the next show.
Well, let's be fair, Philip, it was only in the last show that one of the presenters mentioned what the Facebook group was called. So I think that we shouldn't be throwing stones, Richie. But you can, now that you've memorized it, tell people what the Facebook group is called.
But the Facebook group is called Business Owners Creating Wealth Through Property Development. Business Owners Creating Wealth Through Property Development. So if you want to connect for that, then do so, or look me up on Facebook or Ian, connect with us, and then we'll put you across to that. And we'd be more than welcome. You'll be more welcome to come in there and join us. So that should be really good. As I say, you've got that bit of training that's on the Why Now on our website if you're interested in that. Next show is on Saturday, and on Saturday's show, Ian, who do we have?
We have somebody connected to the world of finance, which is going to be, I think, one of the biggest questions that we get asked is how do people get money to be able to do these projects? Because you don't need to provide all of the finance yourself. Not surprisingly, you use a whole raft of different solutions to be able to put your finance together. And we're going to be talking to the CEO of Crowd Property, who is crowdfunding is playing an increasingly large role in the way in which developers source their finance. There are lots of interesting opportunities of going down that route. Opens up a whole new market of money, and so we'll be getting the lowdown from the top chap.
So Mike Bristow is coming on Saturday, as Ian said, the CEO of Crowd Property. So please come and ask some really tricky questions for Mike. That'd be much appreciated. Good friend of mine. Hopefully that'll be a bit of fun. So Mike will be here on Saturday. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Philip says he has requested, but as of Saturday we hadn't let him in. I know Taylor, that does our social media, is actually not being too well today. So she normally just does all the emissions, Philip. So I'm sure there's no reason why she won't let you in. Hopefully come tomorrow if she's back on her feet, feeling fighting fit. Guys, Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Please post in there if you've enjoyed the show. Just pop in the chat box. Let us know if you've enjoyed it. It's always useful for us. It's nice to know at the end of the day that there's people out there and they're enjoying it. Gavin says, thank you. Good stuff as ever. Philip says, thanks. Great content. Chris says, thanks, guys. Great session. Time well spent. Appreciate the input. We appreciate you guys being here. Yoko says, thank you so much, Richie and Ian. Really good session. Andrew says, thank you. Clive says, thanks, guys. Oh, my God. Ava says, thank you. Have a lovely evening. Great as always. Julian says, great show. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, all of you. And we look forward to seeing you Saturday. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.